Gil with Fortitude Consulting here at Fortitude HQ in the Dry Fire Dojo, here to talk about the 3 most common mistakes that we see in our AIWB Performance Pistol class. What do I mean by the 3 most common mistakes? What I mean is the 3 most common mistakes that most shooters make when they are coming in for that class day 1, and we are looking at things from a gear perspective, what kind of gear they've got going on, right? And in order to go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and take a somewhat closer look at my junk here. My junk being the actual concealed carry system that I'm rocking right now. And as you can see by the distinct protrusions on the shirt there, this is not really an effective concealed carry system because it's missing one of the main elements, which is concealment, right? Okay, so let's talk about why that is, okay? The very first part of the problem here, as you can see, is the buckle placement is literally right in center line. And this is an issue that we see over and over and over again, time and time again. Folks think that they can rock their belt, regardless of what kind of belt they've got, the exact same way with the gun in the AIWB position than they would without any gun there whatsoever. And that's just not optimal placement for the actual buckle itself. Why is that? One of the main reasons is, if we'll take a look at this belt right here, when we look at the way these belts are configured, that area where the buckle is, when you go ahead and slide this onto your waist, because of the 2 layers of belt underneath it and then the buckle itself, when we look at the whole circumference of the belt, that is literally the widest part of the actual belt itself. And when we take the widest part of that belt and we place it on top of our firearm that we are hoping to conceal, all that's going to do is make this portion of the belt line protrude out even further because we've actually got the thickest portion of that belt on top of the actual holster itself. The other problem with this particular belt is it is a traditional leather belt that can be folded in on itself. In other words, it's not very rigid in any way, shape, or form. What we would prefer to see is some type of stiff belt, or a stiffer belt, if you will, similar to this scuba webbing belt by Aries Gear, right? You can see that we cannot fold this over. It is very, very stiff and rigid material. Now these belts, these scuba webbing belts that are stiff all the way around, the full circumference of the belt, don't work for everyone, okay? It doesn't work for every body type. There are alternatives out there, one of them being, one of the ones that I recommend anyway, and I'm a big fan of, is the Langdon Tactical Technology Foundation Belt. A couple of reasons why. First and foremost, it gives you the flexibility, pun intended, literally, of having flexible pieces in the belt construction or in the way the belt is constructed, and it also gives you rigid spots that cannot be folded over, which I'm assuming this is scuba webbing as well. So it has sections of scuba webbing for actually mounting the gear on, but it also has flexible sections where the circumference of the belt will actually flex just a little bit with your body. For folks who don't like rigid belts all the way around, this belt is a very, very good option from the perspective of it being somewhat of a compromise between having a completely stiff belt and a completely flexible belt, right? The other thing that I absolutely love actually about this particular belt is the buckle system. The buckle system, as you can see here, is very minimalist, okay? It will keep things in place, and it keeps, once you go ahead and set the tension on it and set what length you want the belt on your waistline, it will stay in place, but it is very, very minimal. The footprint on it is not very wide in any way, shape, or form. So this kind of, the way this thing is construction and designed is it gets rid of that hot spot, if you will, of the belt doubling over at the buckle point, right? So just another reason why I like that particular belt. So a couple of different options on belts. Let's go ahead and go forward and talk about the actual holster itself. As you can see, this one has the grip protruding pretty aggressively. But the one thing that I want to discuss, just looking at the belt line right here, is in the space between the top of the belt line and the actual grip itself. As you can see, I've got very little to no space to be able to get my fingers and get that full claw grip, which is what we prefer to be able to get the gun out of the holster, okay? So we want to go ahead and watch that space. And the reason why the reason why we don't have enough space in there is specifically because of the way this holster is constructed and the way the clip interacts with the belt line itself. So the lack of space between the belt line and the front strap of the firearm keeps us from really having good accessibility onto the gun in order to go ahead and establish a full grip on it prior to actually drawing the firearm from the holster, right? And when we think about this, in the vein of the 3 elements that we talk about in our AIWB course, the 3 elements that are required for your concealed carry system being the belt, your holster, and your firearm. Well, the 3 elements there that are required for that system are that you have concealment, you have accessibility, and that it supports performance. As you can see with those 3 things, the belt buckle itself in the wrong spot, and we're going to go over exactly where we recommend having the belt buckle in just one second. The belt construction itself of the belt that you choose to use for concealed carry, specifically AIWB, and also the ride height of the actual holster itself, and the problems that are associated with that from an accessibility standpoint. Those 3 issues that we see time and time again do not support those 3 elements of concealability, accessibility, and performance. So we're gonna go ahead and break, and we will come right back and take a look at what we would recommend for an actual suitable and efficient concealment system for the AIWB position. Okay, be right back. All right, we're back. We've changed out some gear, and as you can see, we've got a little bit better concealment going on right now. Let's go ahead and look at how we went about achieving that and how it is going to help us from an accessibility and a performance standpoint as well. So what we've got, first and foremost, let's talk about the actual belt and the buckle placement. What I recommend doing is taking the actual buckle itself and bringing it off to one side, either the support side or the dominant side hip. Whichever one you choose to do is completely and totally up to you, but that is the one thing that I recommend with taking that belt buckle and bring it all the way across. Some folks just like bringing it off center line. Again, because of, especially when you've got a belt system that actually sandwiches the 2 ends of the belt itself, when that is the case, I like bringing that way off to the actual hip, if you will. What that does is 2 things. First and foremost, it takes that bulge away from that center line area on top of the actual holster itself, and it also frees this area up for you to be able to experiment with positioning your holster into different spots. And this is important with carrying an AIWB. I've been doing this for well over a decade now, and I can tell you wholeheartedly that I started more off to the dominant side, off my center line. When I first started carrying, it was with a completely different holster than the one that I'm utilizing now. With this holster, I like running more of the holster body completely center line, which is pushed over to the support side just a little bit more than I was used to. I would not have the opportunity for that experimentation were it not for me getting this area completely cleared and allowing me to go ahead and shift that holster back and forth. The other thing that we want to look at is, as you can see, I've got that Aries gear belt on, which is a very stiff and rigid belt. This one has worked for me, again, for the better part of a decade now. This thing is absolutely bulletproof in my opinion. It's not the only suitable belt out there, but it is one of the best options. The last thing that we want to look at is the holster ride height. As you can see here, this holster has a ride height that is much, much higher than the holster that we were looking at earlier. That is not the only thing that's better about the holster that we were looking at earlier, but it's one of the most important parts. You can see here that we've got a lot more space and a lot more room from an accessibility standpoint. We can access that firearm and get a full claw grip prior to attempting a draw on the gun, which is super, super important. You want to be consistent with your hand placement and consistent with the way that gun is coming out in your hand so that you're not having to make any adjustments as you're actually presenting the gun and getting your two-handed grip on it, okay? All right, so that addresses the three most common issues that we end up seeing with shooters that come into our AIWB Performance Pistol class. The ride height of the actual holster itself, ensuring that we don't have the front strap too tight onto the top of the belt line and restricting our access with our dominant hand. Ensuring that we select the proper style and a belt that is specifically made for concealed carry, if not AIWB carry itself. And last but not least, once we get that good belt selected, making sure that we take that buckle and shifting it off either to the support side hip, which is my preference, or the dominant side hip and getting it out of that center line. Doing those three things is going to support the three elements of AIWB carry, which are concealment, accessibility, and performance. And it's going to help you in building your skill set that much faster when you get gear that is designed to stay out of your way and actually supports those three elements. Shoot a DM or hit us up with a comment down below on what your preferences are and whether or not you utilize something a little bit differently. All right, guys, that wraps things up. I hope you got some use out of the information in this video. If you did, please hit me up with a comment down below and just give me a shout. Let me know what you thought of it. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We've got a ton more information and a ton more content coming up that we're gonna be going ahead and posting up to our channel. You do not wanna miss this stuff. I absolutely promise you that. If you haven't figured it out yet, today's video is brought to you by the fine folks over at Outdoor Dynamics. They make some of the absolute best ammo that I've ever put through my guns. As a matter of fact, it is the only ammunition that I use in training classes as well as when I am competing in USPSA. Go over to their website, see what they have to offer. They've got some really good stuff from their 115 missiles to the 124 Andersons, to my own personal favorite, which is the 147 Liberians. I will leave the discount code that you can utilize for a pretty good percentage off of your order down in the video description. So until the next one, remember to follow the process. Train, prepare, prevail. Stay safe, y'all.